So as I mentioned, I am going to we're uploading right now, a lecture for Friday. And as I mentioned before, at the end of the lecture, there's going to be an assignment that needs to be uploaded. And I've already developed a Dropbox for that. And also, as I mentioned in class, it should take you no longer than the 50 minutes we normally would be in class between listening to the lecture and doing the assignment. So again, we've been talking this week about human resources management, and to refresh our memory, uh, they define human resource management as the formal systems for the management of people within the organization. So we're talking about the hiring of folks, the selection of folks, the developing of people, the training of people, all those things they consider to be systems that any good company or organization needs in order to best utilize its employees. Now let's kind of talk about and recap some of the things that we talked about from this week. As I mentioned during class, that with anything in business, it starts with some type of strategic planning. So it must come from the mission or vision, must flow down to anything related to management, HR, marketing, anything should flow from some type of organizational mission or vision. So now let's talk about HR in terms of the idea of environmental scanning. So what I mean by that is taking a look at the labor markets out there and seeing what's out there in terms of folks they can hire. Think about the impact that technology has on the hiring process. Even now, folks can go on to things like Career Builder or other sites like that to look for jobs and how that's impacted folks' ability to get jobs. Think about legislation and that impact that it has on the employment or the HR environment. Lately with the Affordable Care Act is a big thing that has impacted the companies when it comes to legislation. Then you have competition. So what's my competition doing in terms of hiring people? Who are they hiring? Then obviously the economy. Obviously a few years ago, back in 2008 when things were a little tough, it made it tough to hire people. But now you start to see the economy come back, and now more and more companies are hiring people. Well, what about human resources planning? We talked also on early this week on Monday the idea of the demand forecast. So I need to take a look to see inside my four walls who am I going to need and what type of skill sets do I need for those folks to have. Then I'm going to look at the labor supply both inside and outside of my company to see if I have what I need, if it's there, so I then can use that. If not, then I need to go out obviously and find the people and hire them. And then the last thing we talked about was a job analysis, and we connected this closely to the idea of a job description, which allows you or tells you what your responsibilities and duties are for a particular job. Then you move over and you actually talk about specific human resources activities. We talked during the week about employee recruitment and how folks will go off and do employee recruitment and how they go about doing that. We talked about different tools they use, different things they do in the employee recruiting process. We also talked about the employee selection process and how many times companies will use different tools to help screen candidates. They might require a background check or maybe a cognitive ability test or interviews, which I think we all probably been on an interview when they ask you questions about weaknesses and strengths and situational things and things you've done well in the past and things you haven't done well in the past. Some folks will do personality tests to see if there's a match between your personality and how you do things as well as the culture for the company. Also, there'll be performance tests. Well, I'll actually ask you to perform a piece of the job and see if you have the ability to perform a piece of the job. There might be a reference check. A lot of times people will ask for references and they'll check those. Drug testing. I think every single job now requires employees to go through some type of drug testing before they can start working there at that business or organization. And then also some companies actually do integrity tests, which might be a paper and pen type test where they ask you situations, or in some instances it might be a polygraph test. So there's a variety of things that companies will do when they go through the employee selection process. Outplacement. Outplacement, as we talked about this week, comes into play when you have made a decision to separate an employee from the company. So either through a termination or through some type of layoff or a downsizing. So when you do outplacement for someone, you're providing them services with an organization that will help them look for a job, work on interviewing skills, work on how to build a resume, give them a place to work to find a job. So many times HR is coordinating that. Then within the company, you have training and development that HR will help coordinate. So training is kind of what you get when you start on a job. They kind of give you the initial sense on what your job duties are, allow you to perform on a day in, day out basis. And development's it's broader. Development is taking someone and giving them a variety of responsibilities to kind of broaden their perspective on the company, on the industry, on what they do to help them become a better employee down the road. I think we've all been through performance appraisals where they're going to evaluate what you do from a performance standpoint. Now, many companies will do it. If you're new to the company, they might do it at 90 days. At a minimum, most companies will review you annually, and they'll look at a variety of things. They might look at things in terms of your leadership skills or your initiative. They might look at things in terms of specific things to your job, maybe how well you manage a total quality process. They might look at certain specific objectives they identified for you during the year. But typically companies will do this at least once a year. Then you have reward systems. Okay, now typically when we think reward systems, we're thinking things like pay and wages and things like that. But also reward system could be other things where you'll recognize employees for doing a good job, but doesn't necessarily result in someone getting any money. But it is a way of recognizing folks for doing a great job. So there's different types of things out there that can reward employees. And we also talked about labor relations. As you know, there are some folks, and this is more typical of blue-collar type positions, but it didn't necessarily mean just blue-collar positions. There are folks, and as I mentioned in class, that if you went to a public school system here in Ohio, odds are your teachers belong to a union. I know there are some schools in terms of colleges, community colleges, where their instructors and professors actually belong to a union. And a union will help on behalf of the worker collectively negotiate or bargain on behalf of the employee things like wages and working conditions and also benefits to the benefit of all the employees who work there. So now when it's all said and done, what HR is trying to do in terms of results is they're trying to do things, put people, systems in place that will improve productivity, hopefully that will improve quality. They're trying to generate and encourage innovation. They want to have a satisfied employee because they realize that they have a happy, satisfied employee. That's going to reduce turnover because when someone leaves the company and I have to replace them, that's a cost. So if I reduce turnover, that reduces my costs. If I can reduce folks being absent, another way of reducing my costs. And then also a healthy, a good HR process will lead to a healthy, again, happy employee. So, with that being said, now let's talk about the assignment. So what I want for you to do, and this is called the smoker's dilemma, I want you to write a separate paragraph answering each of the following questions. Is it ethical for a company to have a personnel selection strategy that will not hire someone who smokes? And then kind of explain to me why or why not. So that's one paragraph. The second paragraph is it ethical for a company to hire someone who smokes, but requires that employee to pay a higher health insurance premium. And also share with me why or why not for that one. As I mentioned, I've uploaded a Dropbox under week 8, and it's titled Smoker's Dilemma. So please either type your answer in there or upload a Word document. And lastly, have a great spring break.